It is Wednesday, my dudes, and that brings us back once again to pretty much where we left off in Velocity Lake last episode. Last episode, as I'm sure you remember, we started working on the Pulsar B&M Giga Coaster. This week, we're going to finish the layout. I think, I didn't really check through too thorough. I kind of skimmed through the footage, and it looks like most of this episode will be, first of all, finishing all the smoothing off, which you can see me doing here. And don't worry, I'm going to play that back incredibly fast, so we're not here for 7 centuries watching me do it. That's what I'm going to be doing in the first part of this video. And then we're going to finish things like the colouring of the ride, because I don't want this to just be the Fury 325 colours. We're going to give it its own custom colour. And I also told a lie last episode. I said this time we'd be doing some work with custom supports. We don't do that. What we do, though, is something along... I guess we do some custom support work in a way, because we're going to be building some tunnels. This ride does dip below ground level in 2 places, so we're going to do the tunnel for one of those places. I don't think we do both tunnels this episode. I wanted to just, break up the flow a little bit, not just showing an episode of tunnels, So we're going to do a tunnel in this episode, do some smoothing, paint the ride, and we might do some of the supports. The big piece of custom support work for this ride will be the actual drop of the first hill itself. Obviously, the newer B&M Gigas have that very, very characteristic appearance to the support work of the drop. It's really hard to describe, but if you ever seen, if you just Google Fury 325's drop, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like a very, very thick steel beam that follows the course of the whole the chain lift hill, and then the actual drop. But when the actual track starts leveling out again, the support just carries on as if it was just going to smack into the ground. And then it kind of just... So it's almost like it follows the track for a bit and then it diverges. I don't know. I don't know why I'm dedicating so much time to describing it. But that's going to be what we do next episode, I think, is work on the lift hill custom supports. But like I said, that's going to be the big component of the custom support work for pretty much any, custom B&M Giga is the iconic B&M drop. Now you can see me saying, last week I said that the layout we have at the moment is very much placeholder. Now I'm just trying to figure out how to get this thing back to the station that doesn't look quite as dreadful as it did when I left off last time. So I'm trying a few different things. I'm trying, first of all, without the 4-meter technique, just to see if I can get a nice shape that I like. I think I touched upon this briefly last time, that I like to build coasters without the 4-meter path, either adjacent to the one I'm building or just with the one I'm building and with the plan to, delete whatever I do without the 4-meter technique, just to kind of plan out the shape, because it's quite hard to get the shaping right with 4-meter without some sort of guidance first, at least for me. Maybe for more seasoned Planet Coaster builders, it's much more easy. But for me, I like to have some sort of mental plan in my head before I start going through the motions. So what we've got at the moment is much closer to the layout that we ultimately ended up going with, but it's still not quite there. I did actually add a bit more of an aggressive sort of airtime hill, and I get rid of that weird sort of spiral. This is just next to the path. I was still hell-bent on incorporating the path and getting it as close to the ride as possible. I did eventually abandon that idea and just forget about having it hug the pathways like all the other rides in Velocity Lake do. And I think now I have the hindsight and know what the ride looks like now. I'm very glad I did abandon that, because it gives us lots and lots of room for custom shops, a place to put the queue line, that sort of thing. And it's nice to have it sort of set back from the path a bit. Again, I touched upon it last time, how I liked the fact that this roller coaster eventually will be quite hidden by trees and stuff like that. I think it's kind of cool that the station as well is almost obscured behind shops and stuff, so you can't really... It's that sense of irony, isn't it? It's the biggest roller coaster in the whole park, but it's hard to get a glimpse of what exactly you'll be subjected to during its twists and during its turns. I got weirdly deep just then. Speaking of deep, I wonder if we're getting to the tunnel. That would have been a great segue if I started building the tunnel at that point, but great segues are not necessarily... quality is not something that you should ever expect with these commentaries. I'm not sure what I'm doing. I think I'm still just sort of going... I can just remember what was going through my head as I was just doing that POV over and over, and I'm like, ugh, I like it. It's not quite there, though. So I'm pretty sure I do end up deleting it at some point. Is that what I'm... Yep. F's in chat, guys. Hopefully I'm not premiering this, otherwise the chat is just going to get broken by people pressing F. I think the reason I wanted to leave that footage in, though, is just because I like showing the process that, I generally, when I'm building roller coasters in this game, I cut out all the bits where I spent ages on something and then, ended up deleting it. And I'm still doing that for this ride because, my God, we'd be here forever. But for things like that just is like a showcase of a design that I was so close to going with, but ultimately just abandoned. That's just the process of Planet Coaster. I have, my God, how much footage do I have? If I could literally make an entire series using just footage I didn't end up using because I deleted the ride or I built something else instead. I made an entire episode of Velocity Lake just of roller coasters I didn't use in the game, let alone like buildings and pathway layouts and stuff like that. So there is a lot of trial and error in Planet Coaster, and to be honest, it's mostly error. So sometimes it's nice to just showcase a little bit of it to show you kind of how the coaster might have turned out, because you might disagree with me with my ultimate decision. You might have thought that the older layout was better. Who knows? You're welcome to disagree. I don't really care. It's my park. It's not your park. It's my park. So take that for what it's worth. And what it's worth probably isn't much. It was it was dumb. This whole commentary is not great. Let's face it. Let's just move on along to see, again, it's difficult. Like last episode, I had so much to talk about because it was a fresh new topic, B&M Giga Coasters, and it was a fresh new topic, me planning the ride. I could talk about my thoughts and feelings. This episode, we've kind of deleted and then rebuilt and then deleted this same part of the track. And this isn't even the final layout. I'm looking at it now. It's not even the final layout still. And I've done smoothing. So it's much harder to kind of keep the commentary on topic and focused. But I hope you're at least enjoying watching the footage. Here you can see me doing some terraforming, actually. I said this coaster dips below ground level. I have now established what ground level is. We can start work on the tunnels at some point. So what we have now is a little bit closer to the final layout of this ride, at least when it comes to the end portion of it, but it's still not quite there. I think I just decided to move on. I got so bored of doing that same part. I just decided, you know what, let's just do some terraforming for a bit and we'll come back to that later. Maybe I'll have a burst of inspiration whilst terraforming. So at the moment, the bits that go underground are the first drop, which you can see me sort of laying out the spacing for the tunnel. I don't place it underground. I didn't want to use the auto tunnel, like where you just have like a tube carved out of the ground. It's not that realistic. I wanted to make a nice sort of very clearly an artificial tunnel, and then I'll try and just sort of shape the terrain to match the shape of the artificial tunnel. So the actual the interior of the tunnel is, synthetic. I don't know. Anyway, so you can see me, I was just playing around with different colors for the ride. One of the things I did, I liked the idea of it just being white. So I decided to make it that color. Well, it's kind of like an off-white, isn't it? And I went down to ground level to see what it would look like in terms of how it would appear in the overall skyline of the park. And then I tried the opposite side of the spectrum, which is all black. And, I actually really like how it came out, actually, when it was in this all-black finish. But ultimately, I decided the white was just a bit more, I don't know, it looked a lot more striking, blended in with the sky a lot more, which, again, I guess, does fit with that idea that I wanted of it being somewhat mysterious in its layout. I don't know. Anyway, so I ended up going with am I recoloring it now? I don't know. I ended up going with a white color for the track, put it that way. Aha! And now I'm starting work on the tunnel. So I paused the game at the moment when the car was going to be entering the tunnel, just so I could make sure, the riders wouldn't be able to hit the sides of it. Even if the tallest person on the carriage stretched out their arms or whatever, they'd be fine. And I enabled the catwalk, not only so that I think it would be realistic that the tunnel would have some sort of catwalk for workers to walk along the length of the track to maintain it and whatnot. But the catwalk also serves as a good way of making sure you're remaining perfectly perpendicular to the track and sort of following the actual height, or not the height, the gradient of the drop and the leveling out and then the ascent afterwards, because this is obviously the bottom of a very high G-force hill. I don't know why I felt the need to specify it was a high G-force hill, but it's whatever. You get the point. Again, you can see what's happening. It's not that much variance in the footage. I'm basically just trying to drag this out because we're 9 minutes in. We're basically like halfway into the footage. So I'm just gonna sit back, have a nice sip of my beer. Maybe that could be something I do in these Planet Coaster videos, because in my whiskey review series, where there is sometimes Kerbal Space Program content, I review whiskeys. Maybe in Planet Coaster, I could do some beer reviews. I mean, when I'm drinking alone at home, to just drown out the sadness of day-to-day life, I tend to go with whiskey just because it's easier. It doesn't go flat. You don't have to store it in a cold temperature or anything like that. And I just like sipping whiskey and stuff like that. But occasionally, I'll just, I'm in the mood for a little bit of a beer. And tonight, I was in the mood for a beer because I have some Hicks, which is one of my favorite ales. I work in eyes, as many of you know, and I do I'm a clinician and I do peripheral sight, so I'm based at a central hospital and have a clinic there. But then a couple of times a month, I will go and work at a GP surgery or like another sort of smaller hospital in a smaller town that's a bit too far away from the main hospital site to for patients to be realistically expected to commute every day. So then I go out to those who do the eye clinic there once a month. And one day a month, I work in a little town called Lowne, which is in Cornwall. And I do like the visiting the Tesco there. This town has become a very uncultured place to visit because I go, oh, I went to this little craft beer shop in Lowne. No, I went to Tesco. But Tesco do sell Hicks. And Hicks is a great beer. It's brewed in St Austell. And it used to be their main beer at St Austell before they started brewing this thing called Tribute, and that just blew up and they became this massive brewery. But back in day, I think Tribute came out in 2003, they used to brew Hicks, which was named after the founder, Mr. Hicks. I want to say Edward Hicks, not sure. But it's a really oaky sort of taste to it. It's a very nice sipping beer. And I always get like 4 bottles when I'm out in Cornwall, because Cornish shops always sell it because I guess it's brewed in Cornwall. None of the Plymouth shops that I've looked at, I don't go to like any sort of niche, like actually alcohol shops, liquor stores, like your bargain booze or what have you. I don't really go to like liquor stores. I mainly just go to supermarkets and stuff and buy my alcohol there. So I mean, if I went to like somewhere like bargain booze or another kind of alcohol beverage off license. I'm saying liquor store because of I appreciate most of my viewers are American or not British. And I guess liquor store is the more internationally recognized term, but in the UK they're off licenses. I think if I went to more off licenses, I could probably get these niche beers, but since I mainly just go to supermarkets because I don't really drink that much beer, I'll just pick up whatever I can. And when I'm in Cornwall, I'll do a little weekly shop over my lunch break, and I'll always pick up a few bottles of Hicks. This isn't a beer review series. I'm not classy enough to review beer. Not that I'm very good at reviewing whiskey. I mean, most reviews are saying, I don't really know how to describe the taste, and then read the Amazon.co.uk description of the whiskey. But if you're ever visiting Cornwall or St Austell, I wholeheartedly recommend Hicks. It is I'm now just going to read the label on the bottle. It is a legendary Cornish ale. Hicks is named after the brewery's founder, Walter Hicks. I think I said Edward Hicks, didn't I? Oops. Full-bodied, strong, and distinctly Cornish, it's gained something of a cult status over the years. Brimming with flavours, it's a beer worthy of carrying the great man's name. Wow, it's 6%. I didn't realise how strong it was. I probably shouldn't be drinking this on a weeknight. Oops. I just poured myself a glass as well. Well, whatever. It's a really nice tasting beer. And I wholeheartedly recommend Hicks. I do prefer it to the Tribute, maybe because I'm a hipster, but I do prefer it to. It's my favourite beer that is brewed by St Austell. And I did like the beer tasting thing they do there. They do like a tour of their brewery, which, is interesting and all, like you see how it's made, but then the tour ends with the main event, which is, of course, the beer tasting thing. And they show you all of the beers they brew, and you get to taste a little bit of it. And to be honest, you get 2 pints worth of beer in this. So I did come out a little bit tipsy. Because I'm not a very big person, so it doesn't take me very much to get a little bit tipsy. But some of the ones they brew, like Tribute is their main one. That's what's put them on the map. So I had that, obviously. I had the Hicks. But some of the things, like, they don't even sell in the UK. Like, they do a thing called Milkshake IPA, which is apparently really popular in places like France, where it's basically like beer, but it tastes like milkshake. It's really hard to describe. It wasn't as disgusting as it sounds, but it wasn't really for me, and I guess because I'm British, and they don't really sell it in England because British people don't like it. Apparently, it's something that the French people like. I don't know. Then we had the Russian one. They brew a thing called Black Square, which is basically like a parody of Red Square. And the kicker is that's 15% or something like that, like very, very high strength. Because it's what you need to get through harsh Russian winter. It's too late for me to say I'm not going to do that, but I very much regret that I did do that. I'm very sorry for my Russian viewers watching this who are now deeply offended by my, quite frankly, quite racist impression of you. But I'm just saying that's the beer they make for Russians. And then there are a few others, well, I don't really remember. Hey, look, I've nearly finished the tunnel. moving on very quickly from this hole that I'm rapidly digging myself. I've basically built it out of the coaster pieces, and I've basically built it out of the coaster pieces. I tried to follow the support structure of the catwalk again, just to help me sort of guide the actual build of it, and I think it pretty much follows the gradient of the dip pretty well. Like, at the end of the day, curved structures are very, very difficult to build in Planet Coaster because all the pieces are pretty much just very, very like Planet Coasters is like the source engine of video games. It's very easy to build big, blocky, boxy structures, but for things like tunnels that follow smooth curves of a roller coaster, it is quite difficult. So it's not perfect. Like, it's not like if this were a real ride in the real world, it would probably be a bit smoother than what we've got here. But I think for all intents and purposes, like for what it is, I think it's pretty good. And now I'm just building the walls, which again we have to build out of fairly thin pieces because, as you can see, it's a curved structure. So by building the walls out of these very thin wooden planks, we can very easily incrementally sort of lower them using the advanced move tool to make sure that it closely follows the curve. And of course, the actual skeleton of the tunnel, which is what I built first, is much, much thicker than the walls themselves. It's very easy to kind of obscure the fact that the wall is obviously not following a perfect curve. It is a kind of step down gradient because they're block pieces. But because those thick coaster beams completely envelop the wooden structure that forms the walls of the tunnel. And again, I've tried to disguise the fact it's wooden by painting it black. It could just be like poured concrete that was just painted black. I don't know, because the designer was a big fan of the Rolling Stones, possibly. I think this came out pretty well. Like, I really like the appearance of this tunnel because I didn't want to just make a carbon copy of the tunnels used on the RMC, which I still prefer the look of those tunnels. But the thing is, that coaster's supports are made of wood, and it's meant to be like a wooden coaster. So making wooden tunnels fits with the theme of that. With this being a big, cutting-edge, modern steel coaster, wooden tunnels wouldn't have really fit so well. So by making the skeleton and like the support structure out of like poured concrete and then just filling in the gaps with wood but painted black and using the smooth wooden pieces rather than ones that have like the visible grain, I think it really sort of helps with the appearance of it. And to be honest, this is like even more detail than was really ever necessary because although I guess I am showcasing the build in the form of a YouTube series, so I guess it does kind of make sense, but when it comes to actually the ride experience, this tunnel is, you enter it and exit it in the space of less than half a second. So I probably went into a bit too much detail with it, but nonetheless, I'm a bit of a stickler for detail. I really slammed the desk hard just then. I don't know if you guys heard that, but I was just trying to make my point and slamming my hand down on the desk. I like to have things, look nice from any angle, and now you can see me sort of filling in the gaps. So as I said, I wanted this to be underground, but at the time I built it inside a valley that I built just so I could see what I was doing. But now it's all done and I'm happy with the end result. We can just fill it in with a terrain tool and then gradually tunnel it out. And I tried a few different techniques, but the best one I found that worked really well was I just basically flattened the foundation from another point on the surface above the line of the tunnel and then just manually dug it out using the dig tool on like the lowest size, or one of the lowest size settings, but with maximum intensity, and just sort of double tapping like with a hair trigger, double tapping the left mouse button just to kind of get things all just through the structure, but not kind of visibly bordered on the outside, if that made sense. I mean, if my very, very terrible commentary didn't do, a very good description of things, I hope the footage at least does all the talking for me. And I guess that's just the process of building underground tunnels in this game, at least, from my perspective. I'm sure there are better builders out there. Well, I know, let me rephrase that. There are definitely better builders out there when it comes to Planet Coaster, but maybe there are better techniques for building underground tunnels that I haven't really researched or looked into. This is just the technique I decided to use for this coaster, and it turned out pretty well. So I'm happy with the end result. I care not for refining it any further. So that's the tunnel. So now I'm back to where I was before. I just have to kind of talk about things that aren't directly related to the on-screen footage, because again, I've done all my talking for the on-screen footage, and I'm just left in this kind of void where I have to still think of things to talk about. So, Hicks. Back to Hicks. I just got drunk. Only joking. I'm just joking. Just joking. Actually, you can see me here. I'm just filling out the borders. So again, the technique I used with the tunneling, it works well for the mid section of the tunnel, but for the actual entrances and exits, it leaves a lot to be desired because you can clearly see where the terrain stops and the tunnel begins. So I tried filling that in with the poured concrete blocks from the coaster support section of the build editor. I keep wanting to say like the coaster support DLC, even though I don't think, at least to my knowledge, it didn't come with a DLC. Granted, I have all of the DLCs, so I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure the custom coaster supports came with like just a free update. And then there are a few things that I wish they would kind of add to the building tool. One of the things I would love is to have the coaster cars added as models. Like I get that it would kind of clutter up the building. Well, I guess they'd go into the scenery tab, wouldn't they? But I get that they would like clutter up the scenery tab a little bit. But nonetheless, I think it would be really cool. Not only so you can have like transfer tracks and like maintenance sheds and put an actual coaster train in there, but also for things like, in real theme parks when you're like approaching the entrance to a coaster and there's a little sort of mock-up coaster carriage that says, are you going to be big enough for the supports or small enough for the supports? For my friends in the USA. I'm just joking. But no, to be fair, that is something I've never ever seen outside the US. When I went to Florida and there were a few rides in like Universal Studios and Disneyland and all that, and there were literally signs saying some guests of certain body proportions, very PC, may not, what was it? Our like ride carriages might not accommodate them or something like that. So please check your dimensions in our like seating. They're just like basically saying, if you're too fat for our ride, you can't ride it, is what it's basically getting at. But things like that at the entrance to my rides, it might be a good sort of realism thing addition. I don't know. Anyway, as you may have noticed, we are now showing a real-time POV just to kind of show you what I've got so far. Again, a lot of the final layout is not, final, as it were, but this is getting closer and closer. It's certainly much closer than last episode was to the ultimate final layout of this ride. And like I say, the main portion of the ride is all the way up to that. That was the treble cleft element. And as you can see, I just panned down the camera in such a way that you can kind of tell why it's called a treble cleft element. It really does look like a treble cleft from certain elements, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the layout, as you can see. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I hope you guys like this coaster. I think I've said my piece. I'm going to fade to black. I'm going to fade to black on screen. On the left-hand side is a link to the full Velocity Lake playlist. On the right-hand side is a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm. There's also links to like Patreon, Twitter, Discord in the description, as well as Instagram, merchandise, all the good stuff. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, my dudes.